in some cases, they're the total access point. Like if there is a physical piece of paper, if there's a computer theoretically left at a airport or something like that, that is a human element. But at the same time, yes, you can manipulate a person to give up passwords, click on a phishing message, or whatever. And when you ask me, where does the human element come in? And where this sounds like everybody should be thinking this, but to me, the human element is a tactic within a larger strategy where, yes, a user can click on a phishing message and give away credentials, download malware, whatever, but the user's just clicking. The user's not installing malware. The user is not transmitting their credentials across a network. The user, frankly, even fundamentally, didn't put the email message in their inbox. System did. And so when you ask me, how do you address the human problem? We have to look at the human, yes, as I'd call it the proximity of the problem, but it's just the proximity of the problem, not the cause of the problem.
Ira Winkler, thank you so much for joining me at another series of the Human Zero Day. I am super excited to have a really great and thoughtful conversation with you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always appreciate a reason to pontificate about this stuff.
Well, we're going to talk about something that I think is super interesting and super important. And coincidentally, it's something that you really are a deep expert in. We're going to talk about, humans and the role that humans play in security systems and the role that humans play in the context of vulnerabilities to security systems. And so, Ira, I'd really love to hear in your words your journey, because you've done so much, from the NSA to HP to working with multitude of companies to Walmart. And so you've really seen it all and done it all, really. Written books about this stuff. But, even before you walk me through your journey, Ira, tell me a little bit about how you got into cybersecurity in the first place.
I mean, it was by default, it's kind of part of my journey. When I was in college, I was a psychology major, and luckily I took a random test, and it was a test for NSA, and they said I had really good computer aptitude. And I hated computers and I wanted nothing to do with it. And they're like, okay, how about cryptanalysis where you do puzzles? I'm like, I'm not looking at ones and zeros all day. And I took a job as an intelligence analyst at NSA. And then what happened was I hated that job royally. And I was surrounded by computers. And then I found out that the people in the computer intern program got paid more than I did. So I reapplied for the computer intern program. And then my first assignment was doing cryptanalysis, basically using supercomputers to break machine cryptography. And you could argue that's a cybersecurity role. Then I did other things like including software testing, which you could arguably say that's a cybersecurity role. Then I did deployment, support to military operations and a few other things. But, then if you want to say, I guess when I started working at NSA, even when I was an intelligence analyst, I was out doing traffic analysis to figure out patterns in the traffic. And you could argue that's almost a cybersecurity role too. But where I got into commercial cybersecurity, I left NSA after a while, and I was working at a government contractor, and they said, instead of going into the Pentagon today, can you make a few phone calls? And 3 days later, I had control over one of the world's largest investment banks. And lo and behold, that was cybersecurity.
Wow.
It was I wrote a paper about it. It was called The Seminal Work in Social Engineering. And I had to look up what seminal meant and what social engineering meant, I joke. So that's kind of how I got my start. And, let's face it, it's a rush to take over a bank and steal $1 billion, as I joke. But, after that, I kind of really keyed in on that.
So in that context, social engineering, This is a really, really big and core
Mhm.
pillar to what this series is about. Social engineering, obviously, is a core cornerstone to human vulnerabilities in 0 days. What is social engineering in your perspective?
I mean, social engineering at a high level is the manipulation of people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do or shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically it's the art of manipulating people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I call it at a high level. Too many people want to refer to it as phishing, which is it started out, primarily in cybersecurity as phone calls to get people to give up information. In other ways, I got my reputation by doing what people would refer to as black bag operations, where when people started, coming to me, like after I wrote that paper I mentioned, that people came to me, it's like, Ira, can you go undercover in my company and rob us blind? I'm like, yeah, sure. Did I have any clue what I was doing? No. But, I used some of the human intelligence training that I got while I was at NSA and, read up and did a bunch of other stuff to prepare myself. And essentially, I just would walk around and talk people into giving me information.
So, in the context of, security, traditionally, I think people think of cybersecurity and their mind immediately goes to not just the matrix and zeros and ones on the screen, but they go to machine protection. And today we hear all the time about cloud security and data security and the different kind of application security, right? Where is this human element coming in to this world of cybersecurity? What is its role?
So, the human element, and this is where I drive awareness professionals a little crazy, because I think fundamentally the human element is a piece of cybersecurity. And the fact of the matter is that why do people target the human? The human is an access point for information or computer access. And the bizarre part is that they are only, I mean, in some cases, they're the total access point. Like if there is a physical piece of paper, if there's a computer theoretically left at a airport or something like that, that is a human element. But at the same time, yes, you can manipulate a person to give up passwords, click on a phishing message, or whatever. And when you ask me, where does the human element come in? And where this sounds like everybody should be thinking this, but to me, the human element is a tactic within a larger strategy where, yes, a user can click on a phishing message and give away credentials, download malware, whatever, but the user's just clicking. The user's not installing malware. The user is not transmitting their credentials across a network. The user, frankly, even fundamentally, didn't put the email message in their inbox. System did. And so when you ask me, how do you address the human problem? We have to look at the human, yes, I'd call it the proximity of the problem, but it's just the proximity of the problem, not the cause of the problem. And that's why I say when people focus on awareness, they're focusing on what they should consider a tactic. But unfortunately, most people consider awareness the strategy for dealing with the human element of cybersecurity, when the strategy should be, hey, the human is the proximity, but there's a whole bunch of technology, architecture, process that should all be layered around the user, around the proximity. And so I'll leave it at that for now.
But it does sound to me like you do believe that awareness should have some role in it, or do you believe that it's mainly the perimeter that needs to be looked at, and that awareness is not where the focus should be?
No, I believe every element throughout each tactic has a role in risk reduction.
Yes.
So, for example, a tactic is a secure email gateway.
Uh-huh.
A tactic is awareness. Each one of them can reduce the risk at each point in the chain.
Right.
And you have to understand that a user clicking on a phishing message, that is not the entirety of the incident. The entirety of the incident is the bad guy having access on the internet to botnets that can send phishing messages. It
Right.
includes the lack of DMARC on the perimeter, for example, to let it through. It includes a secure email gateway failing. It includes the anti-malware on the computer the user's failing. It includes, after a user action, not stopping the action by technology. And so we need to look at this from start to finish as a holistic issue, not as, again, a point issue. And to that point, because you asked about awareness, I mean, I wrote Security Awareness for Dummies. I wrote You Can Stop Stupid. Awareness is a critical risk reduction tool because fundamentally, like I said, every point in this whole chain will fail. Everybody's like, oh, those users, no matter what they do, they click. I'm like, those secure email gateways, no matter what you do, they'll let phishing messages through. In order for a phishing message to go through, a secure email gateway had to fail. If a user fails, a whole layers of technology have failed. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have risk reduction afterwards as well. But the user, yes, the secure email gateway, the DMARC, all this other stuff would have had to fail. And if we can get the failure rate of a human from 20% down to 4%, as an example, we can roughly reduce the number of incidents by five, we can reduce the number of incidents roughly by, 80%.
Right.
And much like a secure email gateway, will reduce incidents by 99.9%.
Sure.
Awareness has its own point of risk reduction in the chain.
So what it sounds to me, if I'm looking at what you just said, which is I think incredibly important here, I'm saying that a lot of times people, security teams are conflating tactics with strategy in the context of human security. That
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every other discipline looks at things as a strategy. For example, accounting. Humans will fail in the subject of accounting. And what I mean by that is some human will go ahead and misenter data. Some human might go ahead and try to steal money. Accounting doesn't care about why there's an error along the way. They care about the discrepancies and finding and correcting the discrepancies and then going ahead and investigating why it happened. Because in the human aspects, we also have to consider that in some cases, a human might be malicious. In some cases, a human is intentional on bypassing security, possibly for good reasons. But everybody's like, oh, the user didn't do exactly what we told them to, so bad user, more awareness. We have to look at why. Awareness is not going to help a malicious user. Awareness is not going to help a user who can't do their job because of security processes. You know, awa-
Absolutely.
Awareness needs to be a tactic within, again, a larger strategy. And I should actually say good awareness is a tactic. Otherwise, I mean, there are so many awareness programs that are poorly implemented and pretty useless.
Let's dive a little bit into awareness, and then I want to wrap up about also strategy versus tactic, because I am highly curious on how do we how do we create analogies between the situation we're at with the world of human security, with fragmented tactics compiled into strategies versus more consolidated existing approaches. But
Mhm.
diving into awareness for a second, what does it actually mean to make your organization aware into a point where you can effectively decrease the success rate of these attacks?
So awareness is an umbrella term. Some people want to now call it human risk management, which is putting lipstick on a pig, in my opinion. But awareness is about what it should be about is changing behavior, changing or improving behavior. And the goal are the change in behaviors. And fundamentally, I'll be upfront with you. It doesn't matter why a user does the right thing. You just want the user to do the right thing to reduce risk. So, for example, everybody says we should tell the user there are bad people out there and once they know there are bad people and what's the right thing to do, they will do the right thing. I'm like, it's not really going to work that well. Because, there's this whole thing of complacency. You tell people about the evil hacker, and how often are they going to come across an evil hacker? They don't. It becomes this mythical being that's somehow going to come out. On the other hand, let's say you want users to log off their computer at the end of the day, just as an example. Good practice. If they don't log off their computer at the end of the day, you say, hey, we're going to go ahead and cut your computer access. And yes, that's the stick more than the carrot. But the issue is that people respond more to the stick than the carrot. And people are like, well, isn't that mean? I'm like, well, every other discipline in a company uses a stick. Like, for example, inside just about every company, people have to fill out time cards or payroll, whatever it is. And if you don't fill out the payroll, you don't get paid. And isn't that mean? That somebody just doesn't log on the computer and do a single task and we're not paying them? No, it's accepted as an expectation of business. Logging off the computer, as an example, just one example, should be accepted as an expectation of doing business. And if not, you are not doing your job properly, because fundamentally awareness should be how to do your job properly, which includes the right procedures. It includes, for example, and I don't want to say, verify email to the extent you can, and you shouldn't punish people for making a mistake. There's a difference, as the saying goes, in most cases, it's the cover up more than it's the mistake. And as long as people don't cover things up, like I've clicked on phishing messages and they were pretty clever, or they caught me at the wrong moment, and I let the people know, hey, I think you might want to go ahead and watch for this, just in case. I didn't let it go too far, but I was able to stop it. I'm like, wait a second, I entered my user ID in something that looked legitimate, but then it's like, wait a second, I shouldn't have to do this. And I stopped myself before entering the password, as an example. And so you need to understand that people need to be comfortable, but also that doing the right thing, doing the right security procedure should be an expected part of their job. And if they are not doing the right security procedures, then they should be, treated as somebody who's not following policy and procedure. Because if you don't enforce policy, you don't have a policy. And people need to understand that. Now, does that count for everything in awareness? I mean, fundamentally, if somebody takes data out of the company and, like, that's not a good thing if it's not authorized and done in the right way. And that's something. Somebody accidentally attaches the wrong, sends something to the wrong email, business email compromise, then, that's a mistake. As long as they report it and try to recover, you can't hold them accountable because technology should have stopped it. As an example, data leak prevention should perhaps say, hey, are you really sending this to the right group of people? Like, for example, if I'm on a Gmail thing and I invite people to a meeting or I share a file, Gmail says, do you realize you're sharing this with people who are not in your organization? And so that's kind of a technology to support the right thing. But anyway, that's, to the extent, I guess people need to look at the stick as much as the carrot, frankly. Because while people want to do the right...
what are carrots? Well, what are some potential carrots here?
Example of carrots may include, there's gamification. Gamification, and most people think it's making a game. It's not making a game. Gamification is a business principle of rewarding people for exercising proper behaviors, desired behaviors. So the best example is frequent flyer programs that I'm part of. Sales programs are example. And what's the example in frequent flyer programs? The more I fly the airline, the better my rewards are. That makes me wanna stick with them. I get a call, I can call the airline and not have to wait 90 minutes. I could get
That's a big
somebody in a
one.
minute, so there are benefits for, that's a gamification. They are rewarding me for the desired behavior of flying and spending money on their airline. Likewise, sales programs are an example of gamification. They reward salespeople for selling the tools that they want people to sell, as an example. In the practical world, if you want people to take your awareness training, or you want people to report incidents and reporting incidents, even if you report yourself, you are rewarded for making a mistake. That's an example of a good behavior, because we need people to be eyes and ears, even if it's on themselves. And I don't mean playing Big Brother, but for example, I accidentally clicked on a phishing message. I might have left a USB drive out in the open or something like that, and encouraging that type of behavior, just as an example. Reporting phishing messages, even at that fish report button, even if it is a phishing simulation, you want to reward people for actually saying, "Hey, I think I caught something." And
Absolutely.
'cause if somebody reports something, you can then take action on it, as an example.
Oh, absolutely. Now I'm curious, have you seen more impactful examples of change of behavior, successful change of behavior when it comes to carrots versus sticks? Do you have some observations as to what has been more effective from I guess, an employee behavior change perspective?
No, honestly, it's the sticks. I mean, clearly, and no, people in awareness say, "Oh, we're not." I'm like, unfortunately, let me give you an example, and it was the most clear-cut example. There was one early in my career, well, earlier in my career, I should say. I was what the company referred to as the mystery shopper, where I would go undercover every 6 months and rob them blind. And in one case, and this includes hacking, it's not just social engineering. And in one case, what happened was I really hacked this one system with all the critical data. And so when I was there back at the company for this one company, it was the second time I was there. I went and like after I, raped and pillaged the company, what happened was the CISOs told me, it's like, so and so wants to meet with you after you're done. And I'm like, "Why?" It's like, "Well, you really screwed over his systems, and he wants to know how you did it," which is a good, good thing. So anyway, I met with the guy, and the first question was, "Why me?" I go, "This sounds so cliche, but you have all the data." And he's like, "I guess that's true." And then I tell him how, like, what the vulnerabilities were that I exploited at the time and so on, to make sure he fixed them all. And then I go, "Now I have a question for you. Why is it easier now than it was 6 months ago?" And the guy's like, "Oh, that's easy." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "What happens when, last time you were here, like everybody like thought, oh, this is really bad. We need to take action. The CEO sends out a message that says, cybersecurity is important. Awareness is important." He's like, "Okay, you get a message that says awareness is important. I agree. Awareness is important. Click. Then you get another message that says, donate to the United Way. Okay, that's important. Yeah, I agree. Stealing from the company is bad. I agree. Stealing from the company is bad." Then he goes, "That's pretty much what happens. You read it, it goes away." But he goes, "On the other hand, let me show," and he shows me this piece of paper, because this was a Southern California type office building. And all these office buildings are like 1, 2 story buildings. And given it's Southern California, instead of grass, there are all these nice decorative rocks outside the window so they don't have to water the grass. And what happened was people were taking these decorative rocks, throwing them through windows, and then grabbing computers and, basically smash and grabs on these computers on the
Wow.
first floor of the building. And what happened was, this was a problem. The physical security manager, and he shows me the message. The physical security manager put out a message that says, "We have had a series of smash and grabs." As a result of these smash and grabs, what's going to happen is if you have a window office, at the end of every day, you're to put your shades down, turn your lights off, and lock your door. Your manager is responsible for verifying that at the end of the day, your shades are down, the lights are off, your door is locked. Our guards will do rounds to ensure the shades are down, lights are off, doors are locked. On the first example, your manager will talk to you. On the second example, where there's a violation, security will talk to you. On the third example, you may be fired. And they didn't say fired, they say your employment may be terminated. And smash and grabs went completely away. Why? Because everybody was putting their shades down, turning their lights off. The bad guys didn't know whether or not there were computers in the room or whatever, and so on. And so the stick worked, if that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely. So,
Because people knew exactly what to do.
yes,
They knew the problem. Sorry, my dog wants to join he
he's
just wants to be pet while this is going on.
they're a part
But
of this.
anyway,
This is great.
the moral of the story is what happened. The physical, as opposed to the CEO top down saying cybersecurity and security awareness are critical, the physical security manager just said, hey, I don't need the CEO. I just need to go ahead and say, here's the problem, here's your expected action, and here are the repercussions for not taking it, because smash and grabs are bad. I stole more data 6 months before. Sorry about this, but I
No,
stole
this is
more
great. This is
data 6 months
exactly what this show is
before.
about.
And
Absolutely.
and it was perceived as less important than a couple of computers being stolen. But again, everything was clear on what was to happen. And we didn't do that with the security awareness.
Yes.
Anyway, that's my example.
So if we're looking a little bit more broadly into the way that security awareness intersects with the different solutions to orchestrate a strategy, where are we at, do you think, in the industry of the world of human security today, December 2024? How do you see the mapping of the space? Where do you see it? Are there more, are we stronger in, weaker in?
I see that we have a lot of good technologies on prevention, detection, and, response that are not looked at holistically. I see we have awareness, which frankly has come down to implementing random tools. Innovation is like, okay, maybe getting better data out of those security awareness tools in that space. But, I don't see us as addressing it like I think we should as a strategy, where we need to go ahead and look at how do these tools, like mapping out, for example, what has to happen for a user to lose a laptop? What has to happen for a user to click on a phishing message and create damage? And so, for example, I'll go back to because phishing's easy. Everybody knows phishing. We need to filter out the messages as best we can. We need to go ahead, give awareness, but we also need to give nudges. We need to give warnings, like go ahead and have double checks, like McAfee Site Advisor. How many people remember that? But that would go ahead and warn people, hey, this is not a good website and stuff. We need those warnings back and more frequently. Then we need to go ahead and say, hey, you don't have permission to download software and stuff like that. With the case of lost laptops, yes, you need to go ahead and have, what was it, LoJack or something? I don't know, like phone, like at least, iPhone, phone home type of technology seems to be available. We need, like, so for example, laptops should have their hard drives encrypted, should have the computers locked by default, as an example. So if somebody does lose a laptop, at least the amount of compromise of the data or whatever else is going to be minimized. Not to say it's going to be perfect, because you have somebody really advanced might be able to crack the encryption on the hard drive, but still, you're taking steps and figuring out, okay, What can we do to perhaps better secure it? What can we do to track the equipment? What can we do, assuming it is ever compromised? How to find it, how to get it home, how to make sure it's useless if it is stolen or whatever the case may be. And yes, a user should be aware, do not lose your laptop.
Hmm.
But at the same time, these things happen. And I'm just using that as an example. Map out, how does this come to be? How are the damages or how are the losses incurred? And how can we stop it from start to finish with a holistic approach under the assumption that every point in that whole approach is going to fail at some point?
Absolutely. So Ira, to new entrepreneurs in this space who are looking at the world of human vulnerabilities or human 0 days, what would be your best recommendations for them?
So I were going to look at this. I would look at, so if I was an entrepreneur, I would want to look at, okay, from start to finish, where are the, I don't want to call it the weak links, but where are the vulnerabilities that need to be patched? Because there's no such thing that, I mean, there's stronger and weaker links. There's no such thing as a weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
In order for like the user's the weakest link, the user's not the weakest link. The people letting the user be the weakest link are the weakest link. But you need to go ahead and say what technologies might go ahead and stop this better, or and these days, what would limit the amount of loss that could be incurred should something happen. And if you have ways of putting in good nudges along the way, that's something that could be attractive as well. Like, better marking of data, better flagging of messages, perhaps intervening when bad things when bad things are triggered, just as a few examples.
Absolutely. So Ira, to wrap up what I really enjoy is an amazing conversation.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about what you really love about the space or cybersecurity in general. I mean, you've been at this for a while, and you seem like a guy who does what he enjoys. So why this? What's been keeping you on your toes?
So, yeah, hold on a second. Let's see. So what keeps me on my toes? Um, Frankly, I don't know if anything keeps me on my toes. There's like the old saying, are you going to lose sleep at night or something like that? I'm like, you shouldn't lose sleep at night as a CISO, because fundamentally, a cybersecurity program is like a ship. It's going to be off course 99% of the time. And you should have processes in place that are constantly dealing with those problems, focusing where to go. It's a continual process to keep things aimed in the right direction. That's number one. And I was actually just thinking this. I unfortunately had a family medical emergency like a couple weeks ago. And I was thinking, gee, I should have really gone to med school. It would have been so much more valuable. And then I started to think, you know what? Without cybersecurity these days, these hospitals are bricked, and that's a little bit of a good feel that somehow, hopefully, what I've been able to do is, while I'm not the doctor, I'm able to help doctors or whoever else be infinitely more effective and enable them to do their job. Because I look at security as an enabler. Like a lot of security people I call losers because they think, oh, gee, I'm an expense, I'm an afterthought in all this. I'm like, you need to, as a cybersecurity professional, your attitude should be, I am an enabler. Without cybersecurity, I mean, I'll use, my past employer, Walmart. Without cybersecurity, the supply chain would crumble. Without cybersecurity, e-commerce would crumble. You couldn't take payments and everything like that. Cybersecurity is critical for the Fortune 1 company to stay up and running. And frankly, it's critical for every company out there to stay up and running these days. You have these small companies you never heard of go out of business because of a ransomware incident. So we're unfortunately enabling things that we shouldn't have to do, but it's still critical to do it.
Yeah. Ira, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such an awesome conversation. I loved your perspective on not just human security, but largely speaking on tactics and strategy in the context of
Um,
cybersecurity, which is not where I expected us to go, but it was fascinating and obviously speaking from wealth of experience. So I really want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here and for
mhm.
joining me. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.